Okay, so this is our 35th session. So we are almost reaching 9 months um, with these sessions. So in another week, we will be finishing 9 months. Good. So we are still discussing the. So this index funds, I'm still keeping it. I hope you started with some kind of indexing, and hopefully you start investing your savings in some chunks into the indexing funds. Any questions on indexing fund? Anything you want to ask? No. Okay. So yeah,
I have something else. So the video you sent on WhatsApp, can we watch it? Because I didn't get to see it.
yeah, we can watch it together. I have that in one slide, so we can watch together. Yes.
Okay.
So this is what we have covered for the human biases and psychology. So this week, my intention to cover incentives. This is a very interesting subject in human bias. Incentives is all around us. It also drives the world around us. It just you need to look at from the angle of incentives, then you would make sense of a lot of things that are happening around you. So I can give you some examples of what happened in the real life with incentives in companies, businesses, and political systems. All these different systems we have around us, they are influenced by incentives. It's in an invisible force, but it has a huge impact on the behavior of the system. So we will see the incentives hopefully this week and also next week a little bit if you have any questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I shared this video. This video actually gives the summary of what I've been talking for 35 weeks. So I thought we would watch together, and if you have questions, you can ask me from this video. This is so important. I would recommend you to watch this video. Some videos are something that you can't just watch once and leave it. You have to watch every 6 months so that it reminds you what you should be doing. So I would suggest you to watch this every 6 months so that it will become sticky in your brain. This is purely financial education, and let's watch together.
Nine to 5 at Ford Motor through a combined. At the age of 43, Tom retired from his 9 to 5 at Ford Motor through a combined
You can hear the audio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
effort of savings and stock market investments. Although, on the day when he graduated college, he didn't have a penny to his name. Tom graduated from the University of Michigan Dearborn at the age of 23. Like his father, he majored in mechanical engineering. He had landed a job at General Motors before even graduating, which everyone in his family applauded him for. Still, secretly Tom asked himself, what's the big deal? Tom had always felt like he wanted something different than his peers expected from life. During the first few weeks at General Motors, if anything, this feeling was strengthened. Tom met up with his supervisor, James, who had been with the company long enough to earn himself a golden watch. James seemed proud of his watch, but Tom couldn't help but think, wow, he's still in the same place, doing the same thing as he was when he was my age. It seemed James spent his days doing what he had to do, not what he wanted to do. Tom recognized this, because during lunch, all James was talking about was wild boar hunting, not improvements of the assembly line at General Motors. Tom had seen a similar pattern in his father, who loved going on hikes, yet could only do so once every month due to his busy working schedule. Ironically, making money seemed like it was costing them too much. This video will show you 3 stages that Tom went through to reach financial independence. You will see that different things are important at different stages, but please note one thing right from the get-go. If Tom hadn't been investing, Had he tried to reach his magic number of $1 million by only relying on his engineering paycheck, he would have shared this tale at the age of 57 instead of 43. By investing, Tom earned 14 years of the most significant currency in life: time. You will learn what Tom focused on as a stock market investor, what he focused on outside the world of investing, and, perhaps most importantly, what he didn't do. This is The Swedish Investor, bringing you the best tips and tools for reaching financial freedom through stock market investing. Stage 1. How Tom went from $0 to $20,000. This is really the getting started stage. Many of you have perhaps already reached this stage and beyond, and in that
Sorry, I was talking. So this age, he picked it from 23 to 25 age, upwards up to 43. But you guys have an advantage. You are starting 11, 12 years, so you can take advantage of 10 years more.
So he started investing when he was 23 or
Yeah.
before?
Yeah, 23, 25. Yeah.
that case, well done. Sit tight though, we will soon be at your current stage. During a day at the library, Tom had been asked to pick up 1984 for his mother, who was stuck in quarantine. He stumbled over a copy of The Richest Man in Babylon. Yes, literally stumbled. While eyeing a cute red-headed clerk, he didn't watch his step, and he scattered books all over the floor. The backside of The Richest Man in Babylon read, "An assured road to happiness and prosperity." Maybe this was just what he needed. Tom borrowed the book. The red-headed clerk was still giggling at his clumsiness. How embarrassing. She was even more adorable up this close. Tom hoped he would meet her again. Pay yourself first. The book advocated that Tom should pay himself 10% of his salary each month before doing anything else with his money. Clearly, this was what his supervisor James was missing. He didn't pay himself first. He paid Sika, Night Force, and American Airlines first. The more Tom got to know James, he realized that James didn't pay himself at all. Not that there was anything wrong with that. It just didn't seem like a good recipe to become independent from one's paycheck.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
Now, this is exactly the right thing to do during the first stage. Pay yourself first. The stock market is an excellent vehicle for making a decent chunk of money into a massive chunk of money. However, it is not ideal for enlarging only a tiny piece of money. This early on your road to financial freedom, you should deal with the stock market as you would with a Swedish smorgasbord. Have some eggs, a few meatballs, maybe some herring. You can't theorize your way to what a meatball tastes like. You need to eat one. It's similar with stock market investments. If someone suggests you should invest without real money on some simulator or something, tell them, do your best to steer clear of the fermented fish, though. Tom,
This is also the reason I'm asking you guys to start investing, because you can't do simulation. You have to experience this. So whatever the money you have, you should start putting it in index funds or whatever the vehicle you choose, so that you feel the growth of the money.
learn this the hard way. After reading The Richest Man in Babylon, he went on to Robert Kiyosaki's book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He was pretty disappointed that he didn't bump into the cute redhead at the library, but at least he learned that the stock market is an excellent place where savings can be converted into assets. Without any former investing experience, though, he soon found himself reading speculative tips on various biotech companies on Reddit. It started off very well with high initial returns. $5,000 became $10,000 in just a week.
Yeah, I
Before
am.
long, he experienced what could be expected of this approach. The little capital he had rapidly declined by 60%. The fermented fish for Tom was unprofitable nano-biotech companies. He had just fallen off the peak of Mount Stupid into the valley of despair on the Dunning-Kruger curve. Although Tom knew nothing about Warren Buffett yet, he had learned Buffett's most important rule: to never lose money. Actually, he had been so lucky that he learned Buffett's second most important rule too: to never forget rule number 1. Even though the losses were staggering percentage-wise, they were tolerable in terms of dollars. Tom replaced his losses within 2 months thanks to his salary. Unlike a colleague at work who had gone all in on a recently created crypto and in that had an entire can of fermented fish, at least Tom wasn't out of the game. But he realized that the stakes would rise as his savings accumulated, and that mistakes would become increasingly expensive. Therefore, Tom decided to become a learning machine. Each time he had a meal at home, he would put up his favorite financial YouTubers on the screen. Each time he went for a walk, he would put on his favorite podcasts. Slowly but surely, Tom was moving out of the depths of the valley of despair. Tom managed to go from $0 to $20,000 in almost exactly 2 years by saving $1,000 from his paycheck each month, working as a junior engineer at General Motors, losing something like $2,000 by investing in unprofitable nano-biotech companies, and losing $1,000 in brokerage commissions. Yes, Tom was trading a lot in the beginning. Tom can't really be accused of having been a great stock picker this early on, so it was the savings that carried him the whole way. This time. Stage 2. How Tom went from $20,000 to $100,000. When Tom began his 3rd year at General Motors, his father wanted to have the talk with him. No, not that talk. Tom, your mother and I are really impressed by your saving efforts. Do you want us to chip in an additional $10,000? And perhaps you could buy your own place? A luxury and an opportunity, you might think. But you'd be wrong. This is a trap. Tom didn't know anything about Charlie Munger yet, but Munger would say, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. Luckily, Tom did know about Robert Kiyosaki, who had written the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And Kiyosaki said, a house is a liability. You want to acquire assets. So, Tom politely declined the offer and kept his money in the stock market. What characterizes this second stage is that the stock market is no longer negligible. A good chunk of the $100,000 should originate from stock market returns, else you are doing more heavy lifting than necessary. You might feel empowered by the fact that you are now a person with some means, as did Tom. But don't let this carry you away from your goal. So even though you can now afford a decent car and other more expensive materialistic stuff, like maybe the down payment of a house, don't celebrate too much just yet. You don't want to hinder the effects of compounding now that it is just starting to catch some speed. By the time Tom was 27, he was highly interested and engaged in stock market company analysis. He very well remembered the results from his unprofitable nano-biotech speculation period a few years earlier, and now only invested in what he understood and could perform back-of-the-envelope DCF on. He did not try to make any brilliant or advanced investments, but instead followed Buffett's mantra. I don't look to jump over 7-foot bars, I look around for 1-foot bars that I can step over. Tom's phone rang. It was Stephen, the top of the class from Tom's high school, who had moved on to graduate with a major in finance from the University of Pennsylvania.
Tom, I've just bumped into an amazing investment opportunity. You see, it's this startup. They're like the Walmart of the metaverse.
Interesting. Where's their PE at?
Tom, are you joking with me? PE? This is a startup.
Well, when do you expect that they will start to make money then?
I don't know. Does it matter? We will make a lot of money once they go public. I'm putting in 50 grand. How much do you want to chip in?
Tom trusted Stephen, even looked up to him when it came to finance. But this seemed out of line with what people who had proven long-term success in the market advocated. Would Peter Lynch have jumped on this investment?
Go for a business that any idiot can run, because sooner or later, any idiot is probably going to run it.
It didn't seem like any idiot could run the Walmart of the metaverse. All right, I'll chip in something smaller. Can I join with $500?
500? Wuss!
During this time, Tom tried to not be stupid, as Charlie Munger would have said. Tom just did a few things that others didn't seem too interested in. He knew it wasn't smart enough for someone like Stephen, but he picked up Google stock when the company had a low PE compared to its peers. Some Microsoft on the same notion, and yeah, some Walmart too. Price, price, price. He recognized that making mistakes would now be costlier and could set him back many months or even years on his road to financial freedom. Tom also continued his learning regime. One day he was heading to the library again to pick up a copy of The Most Important Thing by Howard Marks. This time he didn't just fall once, but twice. First, on the girl. Second, for the girl. It was the red-headed clerk again, and he tripped on her when he rounded a corner while she was sorting books on the lower bookshelves.
You're quite the cat. Always landing on your knees.
She teased.
Only 7 lives to go.
Did she remember him? Tom didn't know if that was good or bad, but he was reminded of how cute she was up close. From that day onward, he decided that reading is done best when done at the library. Peace and quiet, and eventually he dared to ask the girl, Sarah, for a date. They hit it off immediately. Sharing his interest in books and frugality, they would sometimes take turns reading aloud to each other. They called these dates reading and chill, so one can imagine that they didn't just read about budgeting. However, that's where we stop imagining Sarah and Tom together, because this is a PG-friendly channel about personal finance. Speaking about budgeting, Sarah was an orderly person, while Tom wasn't really. She was orderly about her expenses too, and it became their expenses when they moved in together. Tom was lucky in this regard, and this change helped him increasing his savings rate. Sharing the rent on a home with someone was cost efficient too, even though they had to move to a slightly larger apartment. Simultaneously, his responsibilities at General Motors grew. He was no longer considered a junior. Tom managed to increase his savings from $1,000 to $1,500 per month during this period. Also, he made quite average stock market returns of 10% per year, and together, this turned him into an owner of $100,000 on his 29th birthday. Charlie Munger says, "The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you gotta do it. I don't care what you have to do. If it means walking everywhere and not eating anything that wasn't purchased with a coupon, find a way to get your hands on $100,000. After that, you can ease off the gas a little bit." Tom had a fire in his gut because he saw that the snowball was catching some speed of its own. What he didn't know was that he was going to lose almost 40% of his wealth just 2 years later. Stage 3. How Tom zigzagged from $100,000 to $1 million.
Do you hear that, Tom?
It was Stephen calling. No, I don't. What is...
Exactly. It's the sound of me driving my brand new Tesla. It's so quiet, right?
Whoa, yeah, it's really quiet. Did you get a promotion, Stephen?
No. It's a startup. You know, Walmeta. They're going public.
All right, that's not how Tom became a millionaire, but it is how his friend Stephen became one. Walmeta made a 2,400% return going public, and Stephen was now the lucky owner of $1.25 million. Tom, who had invested $500, made only $12,000. Even though $12,000 was just a little less than what Tom could save from his salary in a year, it stung a bit that he hadn't been more aggressive.
500? Wuss.
He tried to repeat a Warren Buffett mantra to himself. Half of all coin flippers will win their first toss. None of those winners has an expectation of profit if he continues to play the game. Because how could Stephen have known? He had never shown any particular interest in neither technology nor anything meta before. Tom really questioned if Stephen would survive, would he keep playing that game in the future? Another call with Stephen would take place many years later, a call with a different outcome, which you will hear in a minute. Tom was now in his early 30s, and when it came to materialistic stuff, it wasn't just Stephen who did it differently than him and Sarah. Pretty much everyone at work seemed to be one-upping each other with their cars, their clothes, and their dinner reservations. Basically, showing no signs of frugality whatsoever. I'm not saying that an expensive lifestyle is wrong, but make sure that you understand the opportunity cost of your decisions. Once you open the gate of your stock market account and let a chunk of money out of it, will you be able to close it again? Do not underestimate the power of habits. One part of Tom, perhaps his prefrontal cortex, ignored these rather extravagant lifestyles of his peers and wanted him to stay true to his own goal. Tom, remember James. You don't want to be dependent on this in your 60s. But another part of him, perhaps his amygdala, wanted to show his male colleagues that he too was a man of means, that he too was successful. Because, after all, he couldn't exactly show them the numbers in his portfolio every day. That would just be awkward, wouldn't it? Not subtle enough. He tried to remember something he had heard in a YouTube video. Something about that wealth is what you don't see.
When you see someone who drives around in their Lamborghini, realize that you're also witnessing someone who is a Lamborghini poorer. So, is it worth it? Perhaps counter.
Tom liked the video for the YouTube algorithm. A true role model for us all. An unexpected event was going to help Tom in an unexpected way. Right before he was about to turn 31, the stock market crashed. The S&P 500 fell by more than 50% over the course of the year. Technically, this meant that Tom was back at stage 2 again, as he was now below $100,000. But Tom didn't fret. He had been mentally prepared for this moment.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming.
Tom didn't subscribe to The Swedish Investor on YouTube, but if he had, he would have known that the bear case is the best case. Luckily, he did know about Benjamin Graham, who obviously had better analogies up his sleeve. If you are shopping for common stocks, choose them the way you would buy groceries, not the way you would buy perfume. And at that very moment, there were discounts on every single item in the stores. Tom knew that now was not the time to be splurging, now was the time to be picking up exceptional companies that pessimists couldn't get rid of quick enough. While he usually made something north of 8% per year in the markets, he made 30% and 45% respectively in the 2 years following the crash. Then, when Tom turned 33, many things happened at once. His portfolio was now contributing more towards his savings each year than his salary was, still with quite average stock market returns around 10%. His daughter had recently turned 2, and both Tom and Sarah felt like kids should grow up in a house. Both of them had. So, they decided to purchase one. The down payment was at $60,000, which he and Sarah split, as they were now married. $30,000 was a setback for Tom's compounding machine. Still, he remembered that even Warren Buffett spent 10% of his net worth on a house back in 1958. And frankly, at this point, Tom felt like he had pushed the decision as far as he could. When Tom turned 35, he switched from General Motors to Ford Motor, as he was offered a 20% higher salary for the same hours of work. Even with this higher salary, his portfolio returns vastly exceeded his pay during some months during this period. Other months, he could be down by $20,000, making him feel discouraged. This is the period where your patience and perseverance as an intelligent investor will be tested the most. The additional deposits you make will not immediately have a significant impact on the value of your portfolio. Making the wrong investment decisions can feel like a catastrophe, and making the right ones can be life-changing. Stay true to your process though, and be careful with projecting those monthly returns into the future. Tom did decide to stay true to his process, and he made another contrarian decision as well. While many of his colleagues at Ford increased their working hours, Tom dedicated those hours to beating the stock market instead. And it paid off. Tom was slowly but surely becoming an investor who beat the market by some margin each year. An overperformance of 4% per year suddenly meant something like $25,000 more in his pocket than the average investor with the same amount of.
Are you following? Do you have any questions? Anything you want to ask?
No.
Which stock market is he investing in? Was it Berkshire Hathaway?
No, he was generally saying that he is investing in stock market. No specific stock ideas or stock tips.
Oh, but is it a real person?
No, it's a fictional character. But he took it from the real person. He doesn't mention the real person name, but it's it can be a real story. But one interesting thing I have observed, and you would also observe in your life, when you want to buy groceries, you always try to find a discount. But in stock market, when there is a panic, people runs away. They never buys in panic. I don't quite understand this, but this is a human behavior. So when you have a panic in stock markets, like in grocery stores discount, you should always go and buy it more. That's something you have to remember. When everybody is running for their life, you should go and pick the stocks which are cheap. This is not normal in stock market. When the market downs by 20-30%, everybody wants to sell. Nobody dare to buy it. But if you look at from rational angle or person who thinks rationally, it's same like a discount in your grocery store. If you see 50-70% discount in grocery store, would you not go and buy it? It's the same in stock markets, but it's opposite what you see in the markets.
Is he making this money from stock markets, or is he also making this from his savings from the job?
Yeah, both. Like
He said he was
Shivan
he was saving $1,000 per month, $1,000 per month.
yeah, from 25 to 29 he was saving 1000, and then once he got promoted or changed the job, he got more salary, then he started saving $1,500. So he is using both savings as well as investing uh, tools. Any other questions?
No.
Okay.
No.
Of capital would have been able to get. The hourly wage from studying stock market companies was now really lucrative, and it just kept improving. Towards the end of this phase, Tom also started thinking about his half-forgotten passion for photography. This was a hobby that he had always planned to pick up, when able to allocate time to it, that is. He created a small-scale wedding photography firm. Some small extra income would probably make it even easier to quit his job once the day came. Stage 4. Tom's financial freedom. Tom reached $1 million and quit his 9 to 5 to live off his investments before his 44th birthday. More than half of that money came from returns in the stock market, and his investments helped him reach this number 14 years earlier than his salary alone would have done. With this type of money, Tom was confident that his stock market returns could cover his yearly expenses. Tom is now spending more time doing what truly makes him happy, investing in the stock market, going on hikes, trying to improve his photo skills, and especially spending more time with his family and friends and being an even better dad. He even decided to become his daughter's tennis coach.
Because a man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
All in all, Tom is now owning his own time, earning plenty of money, while doing more of the things that he loves. And then he decided to call Steven, whom he hadn't heard much from in a few years, to tell him about the good news. Hey, Steven, do you hear that?
Hi, Tom. Long time. No, what is it?
Exactly. That's the sound of us not working on a Monday morning. Am I right? For some reason, the joke didn't land well with Steven. Hey man, what's up?
Tom, you know how Walmart was a huge success?
Yes?
Well, I retired with that money.
I know that, Steven.
Well, then I took that money and I put in a company called Starverse.
Oh, a horrible name.
Yeah, I know, but they said they were going to be the Starbucks of the metaverse. And you know, I trusted those guys, but they completely messed up. My boss really wasn't happy when I said I wanted to return, but he let me back in. Anyways, my retirement is nowhere in sight. Unless I can find a Beyond Meta, of course.
What's extraordinary about this story? Well, maybe nothing. And that's also the point. Many of you can probably earn more than Tom if you really try to. Many of you can probably get better returns from the stock market if you really try to. If the normal guy Tom can reach financial independence by age 43, so can you and me. A story that is a little less ordinary is the one about Warren Buffett and how he made.
So there is one important lesson that he was teaching, that about this one Steve, his friend, who tried some startup company. He got lucky once, but he was not lucky next time. So he was playing this game of betting odds, and then he lost second time. And so that's also something you need to remember. You should never bet everything, and you should never bet on I mean, you could bet on startups, but you have to watch out, because the success rate, that's where probability plays a key role. We will talk about probability in some of the sessions. I don't know if you started in your school, but probability is one of the tool that you use very frequently in investing world. Okay, so this is the similar thing we talked about Shiv and Beam, but it's more animated. So I suggest you to watch this every 6 months until you become 18, so that you don't forget about this framework. And this is the same theme we would be talking in our sessions, so that you understand the importance of savings plus investing for long term. Any questions before we go ahead? Okay. So this week, the psychological bias we are talking about is incentives. We briefly talked about incentives at some of our beginning sessions. I was telling your parents that they can incentivize you with money for the things or the habits uh, the kids has to pick up. For example, reading every day. you know I was suggesting parents to incentivize the kids with some money so that they build the reading habit. Same with workouts. And so incentives is something we discussed before, but probably you don't remember. Did you heard this word before, or is it first time that you are hearing this word incentives?
Yeah, I've heard it before.
I've also heard it.
Okay, so I just took the dictionary definition: a thing that motivates and encourages someone to do something. So incentives are driving the people and systems around us. For example, from 1st of January this year in Denmark, there were driving speed ticket in penalties that has been increased drastically. I think I shared this some time ago. This is the news. So here, what Danish government is doing is, in order to reduce the number of accidents on the road, they are penalizing the people who are going over speed. Before they were penalizing only with the standard amount, but now depends on the speed you are going above the standard speed. For example, if you are going 80, if it is 50 kilometers per hour speed limit, then you may get 4,200 krone as a fine. Before it was always like 1,000 or 1,200. They did not had any they did not had any percentage based on the um, high speed you are going from the standard speed that you are supposed to go. So now you probably heard from the news and everywhere, there were many accident cases in Denmark. And Denmark government decided that they would penalize the bad drivers who are going over speed. And they increase the penalties based on the percentage of the speed they are going above the standard speed limit. So The reason why they did this is they think penalties going to influence the human behavior. Hence, people would drive safely, and then it can reduce the number of road accidents. So this is one example of incentives and penalties in real life. And we could also see some more examples from history. You would be laughing at them, but it's the facts of this incentives. How sometimes incentives also backfires. So we will see how it backfired on British government in India when they were ruling India. Also, some example from recent. So let's look at them. So first, let's understand the incentives from the definition point of view.
What is an incentive? Incentives are rewards and punishments that motivate behavior. Incentives are everywhere. To better understand this critical economic concept, let's turn to an example from 1787, when the British government hired sea captains to ship convicted felons to Australia. The conditions on those ships were awful. On one voyage, more than a third of the men died, and the rest arrived beaten, starved, and sick. The public was outraged. Newspapers called for better conditions. The clergy appealed to the captain's sense of humanity, and British Parliament passed regulations requiring better treatment of these prisoners. Unfortunately, those attempted solutions simply didn't work. The death rate remained shockingly high. But there was one economist at the time who came up with a novel solution. Instead of paying the captains for each prisoner who embarked to Australia, the government would pay the captains only for the prisoners who arrived alive. Overnight, the incentives of the sea captains changed. The survival rate of the prisoners shot up to 99%. As one observer put it, economy beats sentiment and benevolence. So as you can see, incentives are a fundamental economic concept that help us predict human behavior. But they aren't the only fundamental concept.
I hope you understood the story. It's a real story. So basically, when the prisoners were shipping from UK to Australia, there were many prisoners who were dying, and there was law and everything, but still uh, the number of deaths were not, getting better. A number of live prisoners are not getting better. It's at the same rate, but then they changed the incentive system. Now they said to the captains, you would be paid for the people who go live to Australia. Then drastically their behavior has changed, and it improved 99%. 99% people are now going alive when they were being shipped from UK to Australia. So this is quite a good example of incentives, how incentives plays changes the human behavior. Um, any questions you want to ask? Okay, so let's see other examples of incentives from the history, and see how sometimes incentives also backfire. Um, so here we saw the example incentives affected in positive way, that now the captains are taking care of prisoners and moving them to Australia safely and alive. But let's look at at example of incentives sometimes backfires. So let's see.
Back in the first years of the 20th century, Delhi, India had a lot of cobras slithering around and upsetting the sensibilities of the occupying British aristocracy. Wanting to reduce the cobra population, they thought,
we should put a bounty on these things.
I know! We'll pay people for every severed cobra tail they bring us. But cobras can live and breed without their tails. And it didn't take the locals long to figure out that they could get paid for a severed cobra tail without killing the cobra. Cobra breeding operations started up, and the number of cobras in Delhi actually increased. The results became so infamous that authority-instituted pest control dubbed it the Cobra Effect. And this isn't just about snakes. The French occupation of Vietnam in the early 1900s.
So you understood the backfiring effect of the incentives. So here British thought there were many cobras in Delhi. Delhi was the capital and many elites were living there, and then they thought, okay, let's introduce this system of, whoever brings the cobra's tail, they will be paid money. And guess what happened? People realized they are being paid for the cobra's tail, and cobra can still be alive and breed more cobras. So they were breeding the cobras at home. So all of a sudden, instead of reducing the cobras, I mean, the British intention was to reduce the cobras, but now it increased drastically because the incentives they thought would work in favor of them started working against of them. So this is an example of incentives backfires. That's the reason you get these scandals like Volkswagen scandal, another Wells Fargo, the bank, US bank scandal. You would hear these scandals in your life all the time. Every time you hear those scandals, you should always look for incentives. What was the incentive system, how it backfired? So this is an example of incentive that is backfiring. We saw the example of incentives that is doing good thing, like in case of shipping prisoners from London to Australia, but we also saw the incentives backfiring in case of um, Delhi cobras. It's also called in psychological world cobra effect. That's a term where the incentives are backfiring. So let's see what happened in Vietnam. That's another example.
Hundreds had a similar problem.
Sacre bleu! There's too many rats! We should put a bounty on these things! I know! We'll pay people for every severed rat tail they can bring us.
As you may have guessed, the total number of rats in the area, albeit tailless ones, increased. And as recently as 2007 in Fort Benning, Georgia, feral pigs became an issue. And what was the proposed solution?
Bounty, tail. You get the picture.
As a result, there were a suspicious number of tailless feral pigs running around. And domestic pigs were also starting to mysteriously lose their tails.
It's too bad those societies were so profit-driven.
But that's the thing. This isn't about society. It's about us. Which brings me to dolphins. When a group of dolphins were trained to bring the trash and dead seagulls that would end up in their enclosures to their handlers in exchange for a treat for each piece of debris, one of them quickly learned to tear apart each piece of trash and gull to maximize the number of rewards. The other dolphins picked up on the scheme and then took it further, going so far as to hunt gulls and drag in nearby trash just so they could rip them apart to exchange the pieces for rewards.
You understood how dolphins were a bit smart. They thought they would use dolphins to bring the trash from the sea, but then the incentives backfired, right? They try to get the get the dust from the dustbin. So they are so smart. So
so the dolphins took dust from dustbin instead of taking trash from.
Yeah, exactly. They are smart and they recognize this. They are being incentivized to bring this
Because it's the same thing.
Yeah. So this is an example of incentives backfiring. And we also saw the example of rats in Vietnam.
The moral of the story? It's not the intentions behind policy that affects people or animals' behavior. It's the incentives. And no matter the society or even species, that's always going to be the case.
Hey, could you give me a ride?
So this is an example of incentives, and you see elders going to jobs, working hard because they are being paid in terms of bonuses or whatever. If you see consultants, they are being paid by hours, so they try to maximize the number of hours they work so that they get more paid. So this is how it drives incentive system. If you take an example of driving in India versus driving in Denmark, if you now, I think in India also getting better, but in India we honk more horns, and we also we don't follow any speed limits because there is no strict penalty system. But in Denmark we don't honk and we don't go behind the speed limit. If you see, it's the same person driving the same kind of automobile, both in Denmark and India, but the behavior of the person changes based on the system he is part of and the incentives and the penalties. The same person, when he is driving in Denmark, he knows he would lose his driving license or he would end up paying high penalties. So his behavior is bit conscious. He doesn't do this mistakes. But same person, when he's driving in India, he knows the system in India is liberal, and he would not be penalized, and he would not. There is no chance of losing his driving license. He honks and drives aggressively without following any speed limits. So that's the influence of incentives that changing the human behavior. I guess you have countless examples on this. When people are in India, they throw trash everywhere. But when same people, when they are in Denmark, they try to put it in the dustbin and then throw the dustbin in place where they have to throw. So this is again incentives uh, in a play. Any questions? Maybe you are wondering, why are you teaching us about these incentives? Because sometimes the behavior of a company or system, you would realize why the hell these guys have done this. They were already making profit, they were already rich. Why the hell these guys did this bloody mistake? Why? You would be wondering times to time, and then you realize it's a bad incentive system that drove that behavior. So let's take an example of two real companies. Wells Fargo, this is it's like a Danske Bank in Denmark. It's one of the oldest and biggest bank in US, and how their incentive system backfired, and then they fall into trouble, and then they end up paying a lot of penalties. Another example from our neighboring country, Germany, Volkswagen. This is Volkswagen of US, the automobile company who did a really bad thing regarding the emissions, diesel car emissions. And again, why do you? I mean, these guys are smart people. They are been in the market, and Volkswagen is quite big company. They are not, but why still they do this kind of behavior mistakes? It's due to incentives. So typically, CEO is being paid based on the share value that he has grown. And how does the share value of the company grows? If the revenues grows, then only share values grows or the profit grows. How could a Volkswagen can grow the profit if they sell more cars? How can they sell more cars if they show that their diesel cars are giving more mileage per kilometer? Because in US they prefer diesel because it's a huge country. They would be driving a lot of kilometers, hence they prefer diesel cars. So you see the connection. So CEO wants to make money, and he's been incentivized based on the share value increase. So he will be getting bonus based on the share value increase of Volkswagen. And because he's been incentivized based on the share value, how can he increase the share value in order for him to get the bonus? By selling more cars in the growth in US, because in US they have more cars than people. So, and then in order for him to sell more cars, he wants to get the exception. So this is the behavior that affected Volkswagen company. Same Wells Fargo bank, same behavior. So let's look at the any questions before we go ahead and see the real examples. And we talked about the example in Denmark. Recently, they have increased the penalties for the high speed limits. Before it was a standard 1,000 kron, but now it's been
Now it's
increased. Yeah.
1700, right? No,
Yeah.
1500, 1700. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it also linked to this is funny. I don't remember the country name. In one of the country, it's linked to your net worth. So, for example, you see this behavior, millionaires or billionaires, kids, they go crazy and they do some nasty thing, and then they, even if they got caught, they would be escaped just paying this penalty. Even 4,500 doesn't matter for them. But some country, I don't remember the name of the country. In one country, they linked the penalties to the net worth, so they have to pay 5%, 10% of net worth to the government because they saw this behavior with the rich kids. So that's also one mechanism where you penalize the people. So when it is attached to their net worth, all of a sudden their behavior changes, right? If he's worth 100 million, if he has to pay 5 million for his son doing son or daughter, whoever it could be, doing some nasty driving skills on the road, right? So he may have to pay 5 million penalty. So that's also changing the behavior. So this is based on the incentives and the penalties. Yeah, to know you have a question.
Yeah. You were saying that based on someone's net worth, they pay a fine.
Yeah.
But is that for speeding fines or what fine is it?
Yeah, it's a speed or any abnormal behavior, speed or drunken drive, and we
So
see
something to
this.
do with driving.
Yeah, driving, and it could also be some inside trading. Rajiv Gupta, we
Yeah, we
saw
saw
that.
it
Yeah,
the last time.
yeah, his penalty is based on his net worth. It's linked to the net worth. So
Okay.
so yeah, this is one way governments come up with the policies to change the human behavior, um, um, to make sure that they don't go out of the boundary.
I think that's why also for the masks, when there were restrictions, people followed them more because there was like a penalty or something. Like there was
Yes.
a consequence
Yes.
for this, because like if you don't wear a mask, you have to pay an amount or something, and also if you don't check in or check out or something like that, there's a fine, and that just motivates them to do that.
Exactly. So I remember during crisis time, right? Police was walking around and making sure that there are. And I also remember there were fines for people who are doing party at home with more than 10 people. And exactly, that's also the reason why they come up with this penalty fines to change the behavior as part of this system called incentives and penalties. And it's all around us. People go to office at 9 o'clock just because they are being incentivized by salary, and then they have family to feed. So they otherwise everybody becomes lazy, sit at home and watch Netflix endless series, right? So incentives also, why some people work even in the evenings and weekends, because the performance of their team or the company is attached to their bonus. So that's also one thing you see. And why the CEOs are optimistic, always over promising and selling, Elon Musk or whoever, the people who are more optimistic and they're selling all these stories, because if the share value of the company goes up, their net worth also increases. So they are being the people behaving, their incentives are attached to it. Okay. But in organizations, companies, or in family systems or governments, incentive systems also backfires, as we saw the examples of British government in India, and Vietnam. And there are many examples where incentives also backfires. In case of Wells Fargo and Volkswagen, these two companies, we also see that. Okay, let's. So I see we have only 4 minutes, but maybe I can give you food for thought. This is some examples which I could think of. So from Indian context, there is a bad incentive systems in private hospitals. When you go to a hospital, they have been asked to, you would be asked to do all testing, because they know that even though you don't have any problem, because of the psychology fear of, you want to be get tested, and they are going to make money out of your test. So they would ask you to take all the tests, and they ask you to pay 3,000 to 5,000. So this whole private hospital industry in India is badly, I mean, it's not I would not use that scam and that big words, but I would say it's a badly incentivized system. So whenever you are aware of such systems, what I do with in private Indian hospitals is, when one doctor told me that I have to get some scanning because they think they have some problem in my body, I would at least consult with 3 other doctors before I make a decision, because I can't trust anymore any of this system, because their whole incentive system is making for profit, and these hospitals are incentivized based on the revenue they make per bed and per patient. So you have to watch out such systems and plan and behave accordingly. The second system you see in India is private schools. You would hear, oh, if you study in our school you will be, topper. You would see advertisements and all those nasty things, because they are being paid based on the kids fees, and they are being incentivized. Same with the LIC and insurance agents, and same with financial industry. You see people selling you mutual funds because they get a commission. You remember I told you, always buy direct plan, no regular plans when you are investing in index fund. It's because people are being paid for the commission, so their behavior is always to sell regular plans to you instead of direct plan, because otherwise they don't make money, right? So now you have a question.
Yeah, what are freebies?
Freebies is some schemes that politicians offers before elections, right? It's
Yeah,
like in,
yeah, I remember when the Danish votings were happening like 3 months ago.
yes,
For each commune, then they were giving out stuff at the station, food. Like,
yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So for example, like that.
Yeah, that's incentive as also, it's reciprocation. That's a word. We will talk that next week, how it would influence our behavior. When somebody gives you chocolate, then you would end up paying more than what you got from them. So this is an example of reciprocation. So politicians give you pen, cake, uh, before election booth, um, just to use your psychological weak point called reciprocation. They think because you ate their cake, you may end up voting them, right? Yes, freebies are all around. Even in Denmark, I saw recently they were giving some heat bills. It's a big issue recently, so they were offering, politicians offering, for some families they would get the money back for the heat bills due to gas prices hike. So those are freebies. Even in India, we see a lot of politicians offering some freebies for everybody. Okay, Arish, you have a question? Yeah.
So it's a statement. So they, I mean, they can give you the freebies, but they don't know that you can't vote until you're 18 or 16.
Yeah, not for kids, but they also give it to elders. For example,
But
Tamil Nadu.
like
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
for us,
Because they,
and in the stations, they gave us croissants.
I know, but
Okay.
they can't just give the grown-ups and not give us. So it wouldn't be nice. And then that's the whole thing. They don't only give it to the grown-ups.
Yep.
So then we would also tell our parents, for example.
Yeah, sometimes kids also influence parents, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Siri, you have a question?
Yeah, this is something about the index fund. If they don't make money and they only make money out of the commotion from the regular funds, then why make the direct funds?
Oh, you mean why do we have regular option?
Yeah, like why do we have both options when they can only make money from one option?
Yeah, it's also the mutual fund guys who wants to get their funds publicized. So for example, if I'm the mutual fund owner, I want my fund to be purchased by many people. One way I can go and sell directly to the consumer, or I will sell through these brokers, because brokers has a huge network. So then why would brokers sell my mutual fund, or recommend my mutual fund only if I pay them some incentives, right? So
Okay. Thank you.
it's mutual fund guys who wants to get their fund to be pushed into the market. So they incentivizing the brokers. Hey, if you sell my mutual fund, I will pay you some commission, right? And then that way they are incentivizing the brokers. The bad thing about these commissions is it's forever. So if you investing mutual funds for 20 years, this guy, whoever broker through whom you bought it, he'll be getting commission for every time. It's really bad system in my view. So you have to watch out those incentives all the time. There is no free lunch. I think you know this expression, right? So you should always see why I've been offered, what is the incentive for this, whatever whoever been offered. So okay, any other questions?
No.
No, okay. So we are good for this week, and we'll talk again next week. I would like to show you the examples of Wells Fargo, and then we also hear from Charlie Munger, what his view on the incentives. With that,
Okay.
thank you, and we'll talk
Thank
next week.
you.
Bye.
Thank you for today. See you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Uncle.
Bye.
Bye.